In the fall of 1974, the Broom County Arena was barely a year old, but already some of the biggest names in entertainment had performed on its stage. That was the year that Jethro Tull, Yes, Chicago, and Bruce Springsteen all played before large, enthusiastic crowds. But none of those legendary acts were the big story that fall. The talk of the town was the return of a group out of Canada, hockey players who had swept into town the year before. By the end of their first season, they were selling out every seat. Nobody shook the arena like the Broom Dusters.
They used to call it Hockey Town USA. Hockey was it. It was like playing home in Canada or whatever. This was the only game in town here. And everybody went, everybody was scratching for tickets to get into the game because every game was sold out.
I mean, I remember one night I had a group of friends from Quebec who decided to surprise me. They couldn't get in. I couldn't get them tickets. The whole place was a sellout. I mean, every game was a sellout when I played here.
I can remember there'd be snowstorms with all the warnings, don't drive tonight, emergencies only. I'd go to that arena and I'd walk in there and every seat would be filled and every person would be going nuts.
It was just noise, 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 and excitement. There were air horns, which are no longer at the arena. I have to admit, I used to have one.
It was just a unique time in our community, and it was so much fun to be part of it.
Few events have ever captured the collective imagination of the area like the birth of hockey. For just a few brief years during the 1970s, the Dusters ruled the Southern Tier sports world. Even now, 35 years after they began, the Dusters are still remembered not only for their play on the ice, but also for who they were and how they performed off the ice.
You had a feeling of being one big family with the fans.
No one was able to say they were treated as well as the players from Binghamton.
The Broom Dusters, those players were part of that community.
They knew this was their team. They identified to the Dusters. And that the fact that to this day, people still remember the Dusters.
The Dusters is made possible by the annual support of WSKG's members, viewers like you, and by the generous support of the WSKG Leadership Society. Thank you.
There was no baseball or basketball up in the area where I come from. It was hockey. That's all I ever thought about doing. I never thought about getting a job at the mill or down in the mines or whatever, or selling something or whatever. It was hockey, hockey, hockey.
A lot of us had little, 12-foot by 12-foot skating rinks next to our homes. And as soon as the ponds froze, we were on the ponds and, little outdoor rinks. I mean, that's the first time people had skates on.
And my mother would say, all right, I'm gonna tie up your skate, but only once today. So in the morning, she'd tie up my skates, I'd go to the outdoor rink and play, and I would come back and she'd put towels under the dining room table, and I wouldn't take my skates and eat my lunch and then skate back to the rink and play all afternoon again.
For nearly a century and a half, on frozen lakes and rivers across the endless Canadian landscape, from towns like Sudbury, Ontario to High Prairie, Alberta, a tradition of ice hockey bound communities together and fueled 1,000 dreams for generations of Canadian youth. On a bright, cold morning in 1938, 4-year-old James Matthews first skated out onto the frozen waters of the Georgian Bay in Parry Sound, Ontario, a tiny mining and lumbering community 400 miles north of Binghamton.
Parry Sound is a great, great place to grow up in. It's a Tom Sawyer town. We had access to all kinds of lakes and Behind my house on River Street, in the river, was an island. I guess my parents didn't put much value on me because we played on that river all the time, and we'd go down with a shovel and clean off a rink and skate. And like I say, the parents, I don't even know if they knew where we were half the time, but that river was our home.
The Canadians outshot the Leafs in the second period, 14-10.
I can remember my first recollection of professional hockey was my father and his friends sitting on a couch. They would sit there with this radio and listen to this guy, Foster Hewitt, go on the game.
Rolls it out on the left side. It's picked up by Maggio. Maggio trying to come in on. He does. Loose. He shoots. He scores! Maggio picked up the loose puck from the corner on a long pass and drove it in.
If the Toronto Maple Leafs won, I knew that Sunday would be a nice day. If the Toronto Maple Leafs lost, I knew that Sunday would be a little bit hard on me. So you became a big fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs and hoped that they won all the time.
But for young Jim Matthews and most Canadians, hockey dreams and ambitions collided with the grim reality of a global depression. Canadians referred to it as the dirty 30s. Thousands of unemployed struggled to find work of any kind, and in small communities like Parry Sound, the choices were already razor thin. Matthews came of age watching his father, a railroad engineer and labor union leader, struggle to keep the family finances afloat.
Our idea of success, and I'm not exaggerating, was anybody that had a year-round job. Even the professionals who played for, say, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they worked in the summer at jobs. It's hard for you guys to understand today, I know, but sports were not that important.
When he was 12 years old, Matthews landed a job as a bellhop at the fanciest tourist hotel in Parry Sound. But he continued to hone his hockey skills, playing on weekends against the rival teams across the Sound or against the native Canadian teams along the Georgian Bay. But even as his skills as a player developed, Matthews refused to see hockey for anything other than a way to pass time. He had no visions for playing in the pros and little passion for the game itself. He had only one goal in mind: finding a full-time job. When he was 19, a friend convinced Matthews to leave Parry Sound and play hockey at Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York. Matthews and the team excelled, but his heart still wasn't in it.
I got to be honest, it wasn't no dream, no nothing. I saw hopefully that I'd get out of Clarkson, get a sheepskin, and get one of those jobs year-round.
But after just one semester, out of money and unable to pay his tuition, Matthews was forced to drop out and take a job in a uranium mine outside of Toronto.
My job was 5,000 feet underground, over a mile underground. And it was not what you call a pleasant place to be. Just putting on the clothes wasn't pleasant. And the guy came to me and he said, "We're going to have a hockey team. We would like you to play." Now, I thought, "You nuts, man." I said, I'm down here. I'm here. I came up here to get my loot so I can get back to school and get done. And he said, "We'll pay you for your shift." And I'm going to tell you, I never wanted to play hockey so bad in my life.
While playing in the Coal Miners Hockey League, made up of players whose hockey dreams had collided with their own realities, Matthews first discovered the power of the sport. He was stunned by the size of the crowds and the passion of the fans who came out to watch what he considered meaningless little games played by poorly skilled amateurs. And he witnessed firsthand how whole communities, living and struggling through hard times, could be lifted up by the game and players they identified with.
Man, that was as great as anything I'd ever seen. It made me realize that everybody didn't think like me, for one thing. it also made me realize what a thing this could be for people. That I didn't realize that people got that much enjoyment out of watching it, of not participating, just watching.
In 1957, with discovered respect for the game, Matthews returned to Clarkson and earned his degree in engineering while starring on the university's hockey team. Within 5 years, he had finally landed a full-time job in Binghamton, New York, a city in transition and as far away from hockey country as you could get. By the mid-60s, the Southern Tier was engulfed in a sea of change. The old iron horse industries of Endicott Johnson that had fueled the rise of the Valley of Opportunity were quickly fading away. And throughout the decade, the community watched as almost systematically one tradition after another was plucked at and torn away.
We bought into the urban renewal program, and suddenly block after block of the city of Binghamton was being demolished because it was seen as urban decay, and they needed something new, and revitalization was a big buzzword at that time. We saw major landmarks going down with bulldozers going through them. They knocked down the Arlington Hotel. They knocked down the Carlton Hotel. In Binghamton, one of the big recreation facilities were people going to the movies, and our largest movie theater in the Triple Cities was the Capitol, and it was knocked down for a parking lot. And I think when the Route 17 Expressway expansion started, and we see it started at Kamikaze Curve in the city of Binghamton and working its way west into the town of Union, and then suddenly those bulldozers came through and knocked down Johnson Field.
Since 1923, Johnson Field had been the home of the Triplets, a minor league baseball team in the New York Yankees organization. For over 40 years, the Triplets and baseball were the passion of choice in the Southern Tier.
The Triplets were very important in the community. You were able to go to a game for 50 cents or $1, and so everybody seemed like they went to Johnson Field. There were so many kids there, and so many kids sitting out by the center field outside that didn't have 50 cents to go to the game. And people used to sit on their roofs and watch the game from their roofs.
And I love the Triplets. I can remember going to bed and having my little radio on and listening to Tony Gilchrist broadcast the games. And I think he did it the way Ronald Reagan did. He just read the information off a tape and then made the sound effects. It was a lot of fun.
But by the late 60s, after a series of losing seasons, the fans had stopped coming to Johnson Field, many opting to stay home and watch the pros on TV. When the state drew up plans for the new Southern Tier Expressway, the route drove right through the center field of the aging ballpark. In 1968, the last game was played at Johnson Field, and the Triplets were gone.
It didn't just knock down the stadium. It sort of drove a stake in the heart of local sports. And that sense of community that everybody had rallied around the baseball was suddenly gone, and it left a huge vacuum. There was a huge hole in our community of that rallying point that baseball had played such an important part. There wasn't anything to rally around anymore.
It was an empty feeling. You know, what are we going to do now?
By the early 70s, the destruction of urban renewal had finally turned the corner, and a new wave of sweeping and dramatic construction had begun. A new governmental complex, along with the 18-story state office building, had begun to rise above the city skyline, and new hotels and office buildings had begun to emerge from the dust of the fallen past. And along with it, at the convergence of the rivers, grew the Broom County Arena. Plans for a cultural center and theater in Broom County were first drawn up in 1945, but battles over its size, location, and even its name had delayed its construction for nearly 25 years. Finally, in 1969, $4.5 million were set aside for the design and construction of the Broom County Veterans Memorial Arena. When the county announced a statewide competition for designs for the new facility, they were quickly approached by a Canadian electrician with a plan. Since arriving in the Southern Tier, Matthews had quickly built a series of successful businesses. He and his wife Judy had made Binghamton their home, but Matthews missed Canada and the game he had grown up playing. But in Binghamton, hockey was nowhere to be found.
You could go to a rink anywhere, they'd flood maybe MacArthur or over in the west side, and you'd chase these places down, and there'd be a few people that could skate, but basically it was just what I'd call recreation skating, just getting by and enjoying the day out, but that's all.
Cornell University certainly had a very renowned ice hockey team, but you had to drive an hour to get there. Syracuse had one, Utica had one. A lot of places along the Mohawk River Valley, it was more popular than it was here.
There was no youth hockey, no high school hockey, nothing. No.
With a desire to bring professional sports back to the Southern Tier, the county agreed on a design built around the framework of an ice rink. Matthews quickly jumped into the opening, and as the arena grew, began working on bringing hockey to Binghamton.
So he got involved and started looking into it, got a group together, and really pursued it. I mean, he wanted this badly.
I realized when we took the idea of putting the professional team in here, we better do it differently than I'd seen it done other places, because I wanted hockey to become part of the community.
Matthews recruited a couple of old friends from Parry Sound to help him out. Fred Muller, a player scout for the National Hockey League, and Ronald Orr, the older brother of hockey superstar Bobby Orr.
One of the first things I said to do, and I brought Ronnie Orr down, I said, Ronnie, we're going to have a hockey summer school. And so we teach these kids how to skate. And in comes Bobby Orr, Ronnie's brother, and Bobby had everybody with him who was anything in hockey. He had Marcel Dion, Phil Esposito. Anyhow, he had all the players who were anybody at the time. I don't think one person at that hockey school, nor one child, knew who they were. It was just these guys could skate. That's all it was.
I cannot tell you what fun years those were. I'm sure you've heard the story of the contest, Name the Team contest.
We had, for example, a Name the Team contest.
I got involved in that. We set up a very large table in our family room, and they started coming in by the hundreds.
We had over 4,000 entries for the Name the Team.
There were so many different names, a lot of takeoffs on Broom. You know, the broom sweepers, that type of thing.
In Canada, dusting was slang for fast. You know, let's dust it out of here.
And the broom dusters, I don't remember now, but there was probably maybe 5 people that suggested that.
After probably, I'd say 20 votes, the duster thing seemed to be the most unique and our own, belonged to Binghamton or Broom County. And so that's how it was picked.
The Dusters had a rink to play on, but needed a league to play in. Matthews had planned on joining the Eastern Hockey League, a minor hockey conference that had operated in cities across the Northeast since the mid-30s. The fit seemed perfect, but as the Dusters were ready to sign on, the league folded. Undaunted, Matthews helped the remains of the EHL form a new league. They called it the North American Hockey League, with teams in Syracuse, Utica, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, Lewiston, Maine, and Binghamton, New York.
of my earliest recollections was that my father, who liked to play himself, used to make a hole, an area where I could just sort of skate around while he went off and played hockey, and then I'd fall asleep. He'd pick me up that night, you know, after he had played. But that was one of my earliest recollections.
The first day I ever took to the ice was the day after Thanksgiving, 1959, and I was about 5 years old. A big old long rink, and it took me quite a few strides to get around, and up and down I fell, and I knew from when I first stepped on the ice to when I made it all the way around that rink that I wanted to be a hockey player.
When I was growing up, and a lot of the other fellas my age, there was only 6 teams in the National Hockey League, and we knew every player on every team. And hockey night in Canada, Saturday night, we just all gathered around the television and, you know, to watch Toronto or Montreal.
In 1973, there were over 9,000 hockey players competing in dozens of minor leagues across Canada and the United States. The men who would come to the Southern Tier to play for the Dusters and the other teams in the North American Hockey League were all still chasing the same dreams.
You know, when you're a young boy growing up in Canada, most young boys in Canada dream of playing in the National Hockey League.
We all played kids hockey, minor hockey, and we all wanted to be like the guys on television.
But the players also knew that the league they had just signed on to play in was far from the National Hockey League's big pay and huge crowds.
Most of the fellas we had were young, and this was their chance. They'd missed getting to the NHL, and in those days the WHA. They had the 2 leagues that were good. So we were a step down from that.
These were guys that had been stars in, say, junior hockey and whatever, but they lacked something that would keep them from going to much higher levels. Maybe it was stick handling, maybe it was speed, whatever. They were good hockey players, but they weren't professional caliber. And the thing that struck me was these guys weren't going anyplace. This was going to be their destination, and not one of them had a thought of what they were going to do after they left hockey, which was imminent, you know. Not one of them.
It's better than working 9 to 5. You can work for an hour and a half every day, play the game you love, make a decent salary where you don't, you know, you're not starving, go back in the summer and work, but it's a hard game to give up. It's a great game. You get it in your blood and you can't give it up. You know, you're not playing there for the money, you're playing for the love of the game. And you just weren't ready to start your 9 to 5 job yet. Let's just keep playing hockey as long as you can.
Of course, I remember our first game, which was for the United Way. And of course, it was sold out. You know, you knew that. And I remember, that was a Saturday, and I remember going in Sunday for the Dusters playing the same team, and you could probably count 2 hands the number of people in the stands.
And there was 296 people at that game. I literally counted them. I had plenty of time, walked around and counted the heads.
The first games that we had, there wasn't many people that showed up.
The first night I played, it was the 5th game. I remember there were about 800 people in the stands.
And to give you an idea how scary this was, we started out with 15 people that were going to sponsor hockey in the area. Probably a month before the first puck was to drop, we're down to 5. And finally, by the time we dropped the first puck, there were 2 of us left. And that person went to Florida and left me holding the bag. And we went in the hole, I can remember the exact number. By Christmas, we were in the hole $237,000.
Ooh. Last night was a lot of fun, but now the work begins to introduce people to hockey.
One of the reasons we felt they weren't there was because they hadn't seen the game, or they hadn't been exposed to it, obviously.
Jimmy said to me one day, we got to get the people in the building, show them hockey. We got to get them in. I said, well, you have to get some tickets away. Go to the schools.
He would have us go to like Boy Scout meetings, the opening of McDonald's restaurants, the Rotary Club.
I remember going to out to Appalachian and Atherton Road School with a bag of equipment. You bring one of the boys or girls out of the audience and dress them in a hockey gear, you know, that they've never seen before, so it was pretty good.
Every kid we spoke to, we gave not one ticket, but 2 tickets, so his parents wouldn't have to buy a ticket to go to the game.
We give a lot, I give a lot of tickets away.
Jim wanted the team to be a part of the community, and the community, in essence, to be a part of the team.
They got the word out there that they were in town. It would be fun to see a hockey game. They gave out tickets.
In every game, there were a few more and a few more.
Thanksgiving night, we walked in to the arena, and people were standing in line for tickets.
And the next thing I know, I get a call from Ronnie Orr, and he says, "Jim, you won't believe it." He said, "They're lined up around the rink to get tickets." And he said, I said, "Ronnie, that's great." And he said, "Well, Jim, it is great, but we got a little problem." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I think I've given the building away on all these promotions."
And I think after Jimmy saw the receipts, saw our expenses, I think we made $600, but I gave the whole building away. But they kept coming after that. They kept coming.
Within just a few months, the Dusters had become a local sensation. They would continue to sell out virtually every seat in the arena for the remainder of their first season, the demand for tickets often far exceeding the capacity of the arena's 4,800 seats. Hockey had officially arrived in the Southern Tier.
After hockey hooked on here around the holidays of 1973, 74, it seems like every little kid in the community wanted to play hockey.
And before the end of our first season, you'd be driving down a side street, whether it be here in Binghamton or in Endicott, and now kids are already playing street hockey.
It really permeated down from the Dusters. They developed all of the different youth leagues around here, and for a while they were running local rinks for 16, 18 hours a day, just to accommodate the different levels of hockey.
But despite all the sellouts and the widespread attention the team now possessed, the Dusters' first season on the ice was a losing experiment. As the losses piled up, Matthews worried that without a winning team, the fans would quickly desert the arena. On Sunday, February 24th, 1974, the Dusters, losers of more games than they had won, prepared for their last game of the season before a sold-out arena audience.
It didn't matter if we won it or lost it. We were mathematically basically out of the playoffs, and basically we were in last place, to be point blank about it. And the team played a nice game and beat Johnstown. And the players went off the ice, and nobody was leaving the rink. And all of a sudden this cheer started. And they cheered, and they cheered, and they cheered. And I'm up in the crowd, and I run down to the dressing room. And by this time, at least half the players are 75% undressed. And I said, "Guys, we're going to have to go back out there. They're not leaving."
And he almost had tears in his eyes. He was like, "You guys, you got to go back out there." We're like, "Yeah, right. We're gonna, go back out." He says, "No." He says, "You got to go back out there." He says, "The fans won't leave."
And they couldn't grasp what I was saying. And I said, "Come on, I'm asking you now. Come on, put your pants back on and go out there." And they started around the perimeter of the rink, reaching over the glass, and all the people there shaking hands, people crying, everything. This is the last place team in Binghamton, New York.
People leaning over the glass just wanting to shake a hand, thanking us and, wishing us well and everything like that.
I mean, I had never gone through a fan reaction like that in all my years of playing.
I think that would be a memory that a lot of the first-year guys, would always recall a very fond memory of this area.
I remember I played Now Is the Hour during that. They just wouldn't leave, and spectacular.
I knew then that this wasn't about fighting. This wasn't about brilliant players. This was their team, and they loved the team, and the team loved them. It showed how much more the sport is, or what it provides, more than just entertainment. And I think that moment in the history of sports in this community was something to really behold, because I've never heard or seen of it since.
The celebration on the ice that evening lasted for nearly an hour. Neither the fans nor the players seemed to want the moment to end. Matthews was sincerely touched by the emotional response for his team, but he wondered if the crowds would return after a long summer layoff. What he didn't realize was that the best was still yet to come. The return of the Broom Dusters for a second season in the fall of 1974 was the most anticipated event of the year. On September 29th, thousands flocked to downtown Binghamton for a parade welcoming the team back to town. Over the summer, Matthews had to order a stop to season ticket sales after the demand exceeded the seating capacity of the arena. He wanted tickets to remain available for charity events and kids, or the casual fan who may want to come and see his team in action.
It was an exciting time here. They used to call it Hockey Town, USA. Hockey was it. It was like playing home in Canada or whatever. This was the only game in town here. And everybody was scratching for tickets to get into the game because every game was sold out.
I mean, I remember one night I had a group of friends from Quebec who decided to surprise me. They couldn't get in. They couldn't get them tickets. The whole place was a sellout. I mean, every game was a sellout when I played here.
I felt sorry for the players who played anywhere else, but they didn't play in Binghamton. And certainly other places had great support, but no one was able to say they were treated as well as the players from Binghamton.
When I joined the Booster Club, the second year of their existence, there were 1,500 members of the senior Booster Club and approximately 500 junior members.
The Booster Club was I mean, an unbelievable organization we had. It was like, I think, the biggest in hockey at the time.
It was just like a love relationship right off the get-go where people actually got involved. I mean, they felt involved in the hockey here.
We used to have, at that time, a committee called the Broken Skate Committee. You could sew the players' stockings because there was always holes in them. You could invite them to dinner.
As a 20-year-old, and not being a very good cook. And yeah, I said, I'll go and visit with, some of the fans, and, they were just wanted to pick your brain about the game of hockey.
It was Jim Matthews who really immersed the team in the community.
Jim had in their contracts, he had a specific amount of time that they had to spend in community service, and they were assigned to go into the community and do things. It wasn't like they had to go out and figure out something to do. They had an assignment to go visit kids in a hospital or go to a school and do talks and things like that,
What Jim said was, you really owe it to these people who are hardworking people. They pay good money to see you. You have an obligation to the community, and guess what? You're going to probably get a lot more out of your contacts in the community than you think. You'll probably get a lot more than you give. We really became a community team, and we all really enjoyed. I particularly enjoyed that part of the experience here.
From Archie King at 3:08. Ties it up. The backhander by Orr. Out in front, score! Bloomfield. Roddy Bloomfield, and the Dusters lead 3-2.
Local television broadcasts of Duster games often drew higher local ratings than primetime hits like Happy Days or The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Radio broadcasts of every Dusters away game were followed by huge crowds in nearly every bar and restaurant in the area. And fans would flock by the hundreds to Duster player appearances at restaurants, bank openings, and at events at the new Oakdale Mall.
I have a picture home that I don't have put away. I keep it out of Roddy holding my son on his lap. And like I say, my son was like 3 years old. And that's one of the pictures I treasure.
Roddy Bloomfield, I would say, is the best hockey player I've ever known. Next to Bobby Orr. He somehow was overlooked always because of his size, but Roddy was, pound for pound, was probably the strongest, toughest player I ever seen in my life.
Everybody just loved Rod Bloomfield. He was the star, and he played hard every night. I mean, he came to play every night. He didn't take any night off. Every time he put the skates on, he gave everything he had. Rod put a lot of people in the building.
I can remember there'd be snowstorms with all the warnings, don't drive tonight, emergencies only. I'd go to that arena, and I'd walk in there and every seat would be filled, and every person would be going nuts.
It was almost like a carnival atmosphere.
The glass was a lot lower at that time. I could reach right to the top, and the chicken would hang over it.
There were air horns, which are no longer at the arena. I have to admit, I used to have one. And it was just noise, 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 and excitement.
Broom County Arena is a unique place because it's so close to the ice. The seats are so close to the ice. And Bob Moppert playing the organ and getting the people jazzed up, it had a lot of spark to it.
I developed this, it wasn't an original thing, but I developed this ability to put situations to music. In other words, a song title would match something that would be going on the ice. I mean, I couldn't memorize music, so I had all of this stuff in a big book, and I had it labeled with different situations. So if a situation came up, I could flip to that. Like, for instance, if a player got injured, I'd flip to my section, injuries, and I'd play, for instance, the theme from MASH. And I had a synthesizer up there at one time that had the sound of a helicopter. So you got the helicopter going, the theme from MASH, and it was just crazy and a lot of fun.
The crowd would be well dressed. Many times the men would be in suits or shirt and tie, sport coat. Women would be dressed in dresses, nice pantsuits. So it was like they were going out almost to the theater versus a game. You see these people dressed to the nines and jamming the arena. They were having a great time.
I think because the team was so new and nothing had ever alienated any of the fans, they were so excited about this brand new fast game that anything the Dusters did was greeted with an uproar. Anything the bad guys did, of course, it was like professional wrestling, basically. It was really, really a madhouse.
Like I've always said, at that time, hockey wasn't just a sport, it was entertainment. And you never knew what was going to happen. It was like a mystery play that you went to each night. And I have to admit, it was the old North American Hockey League, and the fights were great.
In 1977, the movie Slapshot, written by the sister of a player on the Johnstown Jets, chronicled the exploits of a minor league hockey team that brawled its way to a championship. The film was far from fiction.
That was an era of hockey where the fighting was just a normal thing. And it was really kind of out of control, but when we started hockey here, there was fighting all the time.
Back then, both benches would empty. You'd have 30 players on the ice type thing, and there was no way that the officials could control that. So, I mean, brawls would go on for a half hour.
You know, we had Gary Jakeworth, Paul Stewart. We had 3-4 guys that could love to get into a fight, and were real good at it.
I remember Billy Gratton saying to me, you know, if you're going to make it, you're going to have to use your toughness.
Stewie used to get in a lot of fights, but he used to beat the hell out of somebody's fist with his face. Stewie would fight. He wouldn't fight anybody, but I don't know how many fights Stewie won. Certainly not as many as Gary Jakeworth.
My philosophy was, you know, make myself big and strong and make myself the toughest guy, the meanest guy in the league, and basically be the fastest gun in the West so that nobody will mess with me or any of my teammates.
Jake would be pretty mild, and he had a glass nose, and if you broke his nose, or you know, touch his nose, it'd break his nose, and next thing you know, he'd start bleeding. Well, when he seen that blood, he was to go crazy.
One of the toughest fellas that ever played hockey as far as meanness goes played for us here, Teddy McCaskill.
Ted McCaskill, one of the greatest fights I ever seen in my life. Ted McCaskill and my brother Jack in Binghamton here. Oh, did they go. Oh, from one end of the ring to the other, inside the player's bench, out the player's bench, down center ice, down to one end, down the other end. Greatest fight. They just went and went. That lasted a long time.
In their second season, the Dusters would qualify for the North American Hockey League playoffs. In a game in Utica, the entire team would climb into the stands to help rescue an injured Gary Jakeworth, who was attacked by some fans. The Dusters would battle and brawl their way into the league championship series against the Johnstown Jets, but they would fall short, losing the series in 4 straight games. It would be the closest the Dusters would ever get to winning the league's championship trophy. Over the next 2 seasons, the Dusters would set scoring records both on and off the ice. Dusters forwards Dave Staffen, Rod Bloomfield, and Pierre Laganaire would finish as the top 3 scorers in the league. The Dusters would also continue to break records at the box office, becoming the top drawing minor league hockey team in America, and helping the Southern Tier earn the title Hockeytown, USA. And win or lose, every year the players and fans would continue the tradition of celebrating the end of the season together on the ice. After their 4th season, a particularly dismal one on and off the ice, Matthews decided it was time to refocus his attention on his family and growing business ventures.
It was 24/7, and I'm not exaggerating. And I thought at the end of the season I'd get away from it, and you never did. There was no way. It lasted year round. I just couldn't continue on. And so that Andre walked into the picture, and it was nothing to sell him the team.
In September of 1977, Matthews sold the Dusters to Andre Vailloux, a Canadian businessman who had owned other minor league hockey teams but had envied the Dusters and their success for years. Vailloux immediately decided to move the Dusters into the American Hockey League, the top developmental league for professional players. The effect on the team and the community was almost immediate.
The team was A, terrible, B, a lot of the Duster players who'd really got into the hearts of the local people weren't good enough. And the ones that were good enough, like Roddy Bloomfield and whatever, were not stars in the American League.
The American Hockey League was a big change for some of the Dusters.
The players who were in the North American Hockey League, not many of them could make the American Hockey League. The base that we had here didn't make the transition to the American Hockey League, so they had to bring all new players in.
It was like a shuffle, you know, it's like a deck of cards, you know, guys going here, there, and everywhere. And at certain times, I mean, we didn't have a team good enough to win games in the American Hockey League, and I think it really hurt the attendance.
After just one season in the AHL, and with many of their heroes gone, the attendance began to dwindle. By the next season, the Dusters struggled to sell out even one game at the arena. In 1980, a frustrated Vailloux sold the team to 3 Binghamton businessmen who decided to affiliate the team with the Hartford Whalers of the National Hockey League. The new team was renamed the Binghamton Whalers, and the era of the Broom Dusters was over. "35 years after the first puck dropped onto the arena ice, hockey continues to thrive throughout the Southern Tier. Every winter, more than 3,000 kids and teenagers compete in dozens of youth and high school hockey leagues throughout the area. And professional hockey remains, with players who compete daily for jobs in the National Hockey League, often paying tribute to Binghamton's hockey roots. And now, in an era in sports where the divide between player and fan is often so wide, the philosophy that Jim Matthews first preached 35 years ago is once again finding its way back into practice with the players who compete here in the Southern Tier.
I can go back to our Boston team, and our players were everywhere. There's talking to the kids, doing clinics, and Jimmy was the guy that made his players do that. We need more of it. We need the players out in the communities, like Jimmy made his players go out so that people can see them. That's what it's all about, and Jimmy could see that, and he did a great job in Binghamton.
Something always has to have a beginning, and that was the beginning, and so far I don't see any end. And that's the wonderful part about the Dusters coming here in the first place.
Remembering the hockey games, I've played in so many of them, I mean all over the world when I was in Europe. They're all great memories, but the fans are the ones that I will always remember. They were great.
It was one of those things that kind of happened, and it's amazing to me now the people that still come up to me and talk about it. And of course, you know, it's 35 years ago, so we're a lot older now.
Even though it was many, many years ago, you know, it's still very important. I've learned a lot of lessons, and you people taught me a lot. And Jim Matthews was absolutely right. You know, you get more than you give.
It went beyond my expectations, way beyond my expectations. I think hockey provides a lot, and has provided a lot for a lot of people in Binghamton, and that makes me feel very good.
When the dark hour comes to me, I would say I'd probably think back as fondly on my first game as a Duster. That has a special place for me. And I'm a passionate guy, and I'm not ashamed of that. And hockey's been something that I've pursued since I was just a little boy. And the push I got, and the education I got, and the love and support I got from the folks here in Binghamton, you know, I always feel like I've come home.